The Johansen camp, they're making the 3 contentions here that you laid out in your article. He's got a legitimate injury, and it's severe enough to need surgery.
Right.
He has surgery scheduled. It's not like people love getting surgery.
Yeah,
he's gonna get
you wouldn't
this sucks.
You wouldn't get surgery
out of spite.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe you would, but you'd have to be kind of psychotic.
Yeah, if you're willing to take those steps, honestly, all right,
sure, take the $8 million.
Maybe we're gonna give you. You're gonna get some of your money. And he's not avoiding the outside medical exams and evaluations. He did report at one point and get examined by Philadelphia. I wasn't sure if it was the Phantoms or Flyer, but he got examined by someone in the organization.
He did go to Voorhees.
Yeah, okay.
I think so.
So it was in Voorhees,
yes.
Possibly. And he's contacted third-party doctor. Like, he's been evaluated, all this stuff. Both sides have a case. You laid it. Like, the Flyers, it's a lot of circumstantial, but it's like, fucking use your brain.
Exactly.
Like, this is what's happening. Maybe he's hurt. But if he had any intention of fulfilling his contract, he would have got that surgery 4 or 5 months ago.
Yep.
Like, when we told him, fine, don't come.
Yeah, and if the injury was that serious, he wouldn't have played 2 days before the trade.
He wouldn't have played
and skated in morning skate for the Avalanche the day of the trade.
63 games, including half of which, like, at a higher altitude, where you're just more likely to get hurt.
That's a fair point.
Like, all that stuff. So the most likely outcome here, as we talked about earlier, and I do want to maybe go down the rabbit hole of the Mike Richards settlement and everything, because that's just crazy to me. The NHL likes to resolve these things as simply as possible.
Yes.
There's going to be some sort of settlement that the Flyers get under the cap and Johansen is not left with nothing. He's going to get some of his money. The Flyers aren't going to have to pay out all $4 million. Nashville's not going to have to pay out all $4 million that they owe. There's going to be some sort of settlement here where all sides are like, yeah, all right. Like, that's the most likely outcome?
I would say that is definitely the most likely. It's not the only possible outcome. So the way this is going to play out is, assuming, because Elliot Friedman tweeted today that Johansen cleared waivers, he can now be bought out. I guess the Flyers have not officially announced that they have not bought him out. They have terminated.
Yeah.
I guess the Flyers have not yet officially announced that they've terminated the deal. I don't know why they go through this if they're not going to. So assume he's going to be termed. The contract is going to be terminated.
They put out a press release yesterday and they're like, we changed our mind.
Yeah, 24 hours later, changed our minds. So assuming that the Flyers do indeed terminate his deal today, the NHLPA, on behalf of Johansen, would have 60 days to file a grievance. Then, after that grievance, eventually, it would go to an arbitrator. However, in the other similar circumstances where players had his contract terminated, I'm thinking of 3 in particular. I'm thinking of the most recent one where Corey Perry was involved in that very sketchy, never really learned exactly what happened, but something off the ice where he did something wrong and they terminated his deal. There was that one that happened last winter. There was the Mike Richards one that happened in 2015. Where he was arrested at the border and he got his contract terminated. And then there was the Evander Kane one in 2021 where he breached COVID protocols in the AHL and they terminated his deal for that. In all 3 of those instances, it did not actually get to the arbitrator. The NHL and the NHLPA agreed to a settlement. Actually, in the Perry's case, there wasn't even a grievance. They agreed to a settlement without a grievance.
Yeah, they never filed.
They never actually filed a grievance. They threatened to, and they never actually did.
Everyone kept expecting there to be a grievance filed, and then eventually it was just like, yeah, this is over.
Yeah,
because that was like an undisclosed settlement, right?
We figured out. Yeah, it was undisclosed. But in all 3 cases, there was a settlement that was reached. Now, is it possible that there cannot be a settlement reached, and this does go to an arbitrator? Sure, it's possible. That is drawn out in the CBA as a possible outcome, so it could happen. But history tells us that the NHL and the NHLPA generally likes to settle these things. So yes, I would have to guess that probably this gets settled in some form, and in a settlement, neither side gets everything they want. Johansen, in an ideal world for him, he gets all $8 million of his money, and he retires or then becomes a free agent at the end of next season and signs with somebody else because magically he's healthy again. Who the hell knows? Like, that would be his dream. The Flyers' dream would be the entire cap is wiped away and he's off their books and they don't have to pay him a damn thing. I guess neither is Nashville because the contract gets terminated and boom, it's over. I suspect that neither side is going to get everything of what they want. But I do think that both sides will get something. And for the Flyers, why this, I have to consider the fact that they got the NHL on board with this to be a win, a big win for them. Because while there's no guarantee that they are going to win this outright, that Johansen's just going to accept this, he's not going to file a grievance, and the Flyers are just going to have $4 million of cap space just wiped away. I don't think that's going to happen. The Flyers don't really need $4 million worth of cap space to be wiped away for this to be worth their while. Right now, they are a little over $800,000 over the $88 million cap. They don't need $4 million wiped away to be under the cap. They really just need about $1 million. So even if the settlement turns a $4 million cap charge on their books to a $3 million cap charge, that is better than the alternative of just having a $4 million cap charge on their books. And precedent tells us the NHL tends to settle these things with the NHLPA. And even a settlement is probably going to get the Flyers what they want, which is a better situation than what they were dealing with 2 days ago, which was a full $4 million cap charge. It's likely going to get them enough of a relief to get them under the cap. Most likely, I think that's how this plays out. So for the Flyers, like, hey, if the NHL's on board with this, why not?
2 of the 3 possible outcomes put the Flyers in a better situation than the one they were in yesterday.
Right.
Where they were like, yeah, we're $830K over the cap, and we don't want to use LTIR. What are our options?
Exactly.
And now it's like 2 of the 3 outcomes that could come from this. We're better off. And the third one is, well, fuck, we got to put someone on LTIR.
It's exactly the same position they were in on Sunday.
Exactly that position.
Yes.
This is one of the I have like in the outline here, like side quest. It's like the Mike Richards thing. This is one I just thought of because we said yesterday, Puckpedia tweeted out, there's never been a termination of a retained salary contract.
Right.
Do we know how this would affect Nashville?
We do not. I have no idea.
A buyout in this situation, it's like, yeah, regardless of that, like it affects both teams the same. Like if St. Louis was to have bought out Kevin Hayes instead of trading him, the Flyers would just be paying a Kevin Hayes 50% of his buyout rather than 50% of his salary for the retain. Like whatever they do, it affects you. I wonder if, and this is, we'll figure out over the next couple days or weeks or whatever, but like if he loses his grievance, like if he loses this situation, whatever, the arbitration, Ryan Johansen, I wonder if he has a separate grievance like, Nashville, this has nothing to fucking do with you. You owe me $4 million, but it is all one contract.
It is,
so I assume it would affect both teams.
He would not have the ability to do that because once a team trades away a player's rights, they basically lose all control over what happens to that contract after they make the trade. So Nashville, now the interesting question though is if there's a settlement, how does it affect Nashville? And the reason why it's an interesting question is we don't have a precedent. We don't know. Now, basically, because the settlement is, this is not a settlement that will be negotiated between the Flyers and Johansen. This is a settlement that would be negotiated between the NHL and the NHLPA.
Yeah.
So the NHL, in theory, is negotiating, while they're primarily negotiating on behalf of the Flyers, they, in theory, are also kind of looking out for the Preds, too, because the Preds are under the NHL umbrella. The settlement could be anything. As I made the joke yesterday, it could even be a boat. But, like, I guess in theory, the settlement is whatever the NHL and the NHLPA agree to. If the NHL and the NHLPA agree to a settlement that completely cuts the Predators out, they could do that. The NHL and the NHLPA could, I guess, theoretically agree to a settlement where the Flyers basically do a buyout, but instead they have to cover the entire buyout and the Preds don't have to cover any of it. Like, people have asked me essentially, like, well, could this happen in a settlement? Could this happen in a settlement? And my answer has been, really anything can happen in a settlement. Once you get in a negotiation between the NHL and the NHLPA, you can pretty much negotiate anything. So the door is wide open for any possible negotiations. What I will say, though, is that generally speaking, these settlements tend to exist in reality. Yes. And what I mean by that is, so here's an example. The Evander Kane settlement. The Evander Kane settlement that the NHL and the NHLPA ultimately came to essentially was a make-whole settlement. Because what happened was Evander Kane got his contract terminated, caught on with the Edmonton Oilers. He got his contract terminated with the Sharks, which was, I believe, about $19 million more of real money, something like that. That's what the Sharks were like trying to get out of. He caught on with the Oilers, impressed them, and then the Oilers signed him, I believe, to a contract worth about $16.5 million. While this settlement grievance process was going on. That was going on because Kane continued his career, found another team, that other team paid him more money. What the settlement ultimately ended up being was, okay, San Jose, you don't have to pay him the full $19 million that you terminated, but you got to make him whole. So you got to pay him $2.5 million so that functionally Kane is making the exact same money he would have made in total from the two teams, as opposed to if you didn't terminate the contract at all. So that's what I'm saying, where like these settlements tend to exist in what seems like something that both sides can agree is fair, which tells me that this is what if I had to guess, and again, this is not coming from any inside information. This is just based on the fact that these settlements tend to play out in a way that both sides can agree is like, yeah, that passes the smell test as in being fair. I could easily see this playing out where the NHL basically tells Johansen, okay, dude, the Flyers wanted to buy you out. That was how they wanted to resolve this in the first place. You didn't let them because you said you were hurt. We all know that was kind of bullshit. Now you are running the risk of getting zero money rather than getting the buyout that they probably would have done anyway. Why don't you just accept that functionally they're going to buy you out? You're going to get 2/3 of your $8 million. So you're going to get close to what you were contracted and what you would have gotten had you just allowed the buyout to happen anyway. The Flyers get their cap relief, but they still got to pay some money. Done. It would not shock me if after 100 days of back and forth negotiating, that's more or less what these two sides come to. And honestly, that strikes me as fair. Because, like, the Flyers would have just bought him out. He would have gotten 2/3 of the money. If that's the way it plays out, that strikes me as a fair resolution. And based on the way these things have been resolved in the past, that seems like a reasonable way for this to ultimately conclude after all the lawyers get their money and the NHL and the NHLPA goes in 5 different meetings and yells at each other in a boardroom for 3 months.
And I was wondering, like, because the cap hits is what is going to affect the Flyers, but we know in a lot of these longer term deals, like Johansen is on, the money can change and it sometimes goes down, but real cash is also $8 million.
Yeah,
it's not like he's fighting over 3.
No. His deal was you get $8 million every single year. Yes.
So,
which makes it very easy to talk about.
Yeah, it does. So like, it's not even
It's a lot of money.
It's $8 million.
It's a lot of money.
And not as if $3 million isn't, but like, it's not as if he's made so much of his contract and the only thing that really matters is the cap hit to the Flyers. No, he's still asking for $8 million of his $8 million that he still owes.
Yeah,
so
and that's
that
why,
makes it make a lot more sense.
That's why when you get into a settlement, when you get into a negotiation, like Johansen may be confident that he's in the right here, but if it goes to arbitration, there is a risk that he gets nothing, which motivates him to come to the table and be willing to give up more than he wants to make sure he gets something. So and $8 million is not an insignificant amount of money.
That's why innocent people sign plea deals.
Right.
It's like, I could lose.
Yeah, it's a risk.
Yeah. So he's going to do that. I will say something that makes me very optimistic about the Flyers' position here. The NHL is going to go hard as hell because of the interests of one of their Gary Bettman's Sunbelt pet project teams is represented here.
Oh, Nashville.
If this was just the Flyers, I'd be like, oh, Johansen's winning this. I don't know. Nashville's involved. That's one of his pet projects.
Well, if it played out where they basically just said, okay, we're going to pretend that you bought Johansen out, the Flyers would have a $1.33 million cap hit for next year, for this upcoming season, and then a $1.33 million cap hit for the 2025-2026 season. What would hurt Nashville is Nashville would also have the same cap hit charge on their books due to the buyout. Is it possible that in the settlement, maybe the NHL says, all right, Nashville wasn't part of this. Maybe the Flyers, instead of having a $1.33 million cap hit charge every year, they have a $2.66 million cap hit charge. It's possible. And the Flyers, I believe, would still be, it wouldn't be ideal for them.
They'd still be in the black.
They would still be okay with that because they would still be below the $88 million. Like, maybe that's how it plays out because they say, The NHL decides this dispute had nothing to do with the Predators. They should not be punished for this. So the Flyers are taking on the full buyout of the $8 million. Maybe that's the way it plays out. But again, this is more just me theorizing based on the way these things have worked out in the past with the NHL and the NHLPA agreeing to a settlement that just makes sense based on what seems like fairness.
We all silly like the mayor.